deceptive, manipulative.
Is also a former social worker and a political campaign activist.
Some people in town say the base is run by aliens working with our federal government to conduct mind control and genetic experiments.
I'm leaving. I'm glad. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass.
Hello, Podcast Nation. Welcome to the Eerie Americas. This is one of your hosts, Kristi Hull.
This is Vicky Ayala.
And thank you for joining us this week. So, Vix, how you doing? How you feeling? What's up?
Oh, God. Ever since we recorded the episode that talked about how dead my job is, my job has been non-stop. I feel like it's just a jinx.
So we call that in our culture boca de chivo, which means goat mouth. I know Jamaicans also say goat mouth. So it's basically like when you say something, you will it to change. And
oh, yeah. It changed because I don't have time to breathe. I don't think I've had much lunch this week, which kind of was great because I lost like 2 pounds. But I did have one super like crazy day. We talk about all the time, the commute in New York City is horrendous.
Sorry, guys. We hate the MTA, so this will be a recurring theme.
Yeah, if you can't take it, then just fast forward like the first couple
or
minutes of our
email us
episode.
at theearieamericas@gmail.com and tell us to shut the hell up about it, and we will stop complaining about it. But this is our life, so you're going to hear it.
I actually live pretty close to where I work, so I'm supposed to have the easiest commute. It's literally like 7 minutes on the train. I'm 5 stops away from my job on the train.
Which, for people that don't live in New York, that's probably about a half a mile, even.
It's close. It's literally 7 minutes on the train when it's running properly,
right.
Which is never, but that's how long it's supposed to take. So I get out at 5 o'clock. This is Monday. Mondays fucking suck. This was Monday. I'm exhausted. My neighbor had called me and his dog sitter was like sick and he's like, hey, can you go walk the dog? I have a final. I'm like, all right, cool. Like I'll be home by 5:30. I even with walking to and from the station and walking home, it takes me less than half an hour to get home. Famous last words. I'm on the train and I'm like, hey, the train stopped for a second, but we should be moving shortly. Whenever MTA says we'll be moving shortly, they won't be moving shortly.
They say that to you so that you're not screaming and cursing and jumping out of the train to attempt to kill them.
Right.
So that's their way of trying to control the masses, is telling you they will be moving shortly. That is a standard thing to say. And her man is in the MTA. It's just the facts.
And he gets stuck on the train when he goes to his stuff. So that's like how the MTA gives no fucks. It doesn't care if you work for them or not. So mind you, I'm 3 stops in. I'm only 2 stops from home. So this is why it's super frustrating. I'm like, I am almost home. I can taste it. So I'm sitting there and, he's bullshitting, telling us it'll be moving shortly. There's a signal. They have to fix it. 25 minutes later, I have horrendous anxiety and I'm basically texting like my mom my goodbyes because I'm like, I'm going to die on this fucking train. Finally, the conductor comes back on.
I only laugh at that because you don't know Vicky the way I know Vicky, and that's literally how she thinks. So
I do.
Hysterical.
I literally text people and I was like, hey guys, gonna die on this train. Tell my mom I love her. You can have my purses. Bury me with, I already know what I'm going to be buried with.
Bury me in with all my favorite colors.
Yeah, I'm telling you, my last will and testament is in those text messages. So finally, the conductor comes back on and I'm like, finally, we're going to move. Basically, they couldn't fix the signal. The train could not move anymore, and he had to manually come to every single door and unlock it with the key and let us out of the train.
Oh, hell no, dude. I am somebody that has lived here, let's see, let me do the math here, because, my famous math, over 20 years. And that still hasn't happened to me. This is how rare that this happens.
Yeah, the commutes are bad, but it's very rare that someone has to, rescue you from the train. It doesn't happen very often.
So when she told me that, I was like, wow, this is crazy. I've never heard of this. And, of course, just from her one line messing up, the whole train line messed up. So I got the back end of that, too.
Right, one train messing up affects everyone. So then the minute I get stuck on a train, I always start texting everyone, hey...
Gonna be a delay.
There's gonna be a delay. And it happened because a couple days later, someone actually got hit by the train. I was on the train and I was like, guys, everyone I knew, I was texting Matt, I was like, don't take the train right now. But needless to say, after that traumatizing experience, I did Uber to and from work for 3 days after that because I couldn't do it. It's like a never-ending battle with commuting in New York.
Yeah, no, trust me, it's been way too long for me. And I was telling you earlier, we were talking about this, and I get people look at the television or they come and visit and they're like, wow, these people are banshees. But after 5, 10, 15, 20, longer plus years than that, you just start to lose your mind. You become that crazy person yelling at people. You become that crazy guy telling people, quit hogging the pole, get the hell out of my way. You're over it.
It's every day. It's Monday through Friday. It's to work. It's from work. And everybody's on the train at the same time, to the point where I have scheduled myself on what train to take that is not as crowded as the other trains, because I couldn't take it anymore. But not everybody has that option.
And mind you, like she even said, that's a short commute. Some of us go hour, 2 hours,
right,
one direction. So we're talking 2 to 4, maybe sometimes 5 hours on this train. You are going to eventually lose your mind. That's just how it is here. People are not destined to be underground in large groups of people
for that long altogether.
There's like gonna be tension box. There's always gonna be this issue. There's always gonna be technical difficulties. There's always gonna be, please be patient, we'll be moving at any time.
Oh my god, there's nothing I hate more than when the fucking conductor tells you thank you for your patience. Like, I literally turned to Ryan and I was like, I swear on everything, please do not tell people thank you for your patience, because one, you're not giving us an option. It's not like I have an option of being anything other than patient. And you're also assuming that I'm patient. I'm not. We're New Yorkers. We're not patient.
And Ryan is from New York too. He knows that that's a bullshit line. So I hope he doesn't fall into that.
Oh, when they actually told him in class, they were like, you should stop saying that. Yes, you should. Because the last thing I want to hear in a frustrating commute is you thanking me for my patience. Just tell me whatever the fuck we're moving again. I also had a recommendation for this week. I know that you started watching it too, but Lorena, about the Lorena Bobbitt story, which when it happened, we were pretty young, so it was always just a joke for us growing up, like, hey, I'm gonna Lorena Bobbitt you. But now that I'm seeing the full story, it's incredibly sad, and I think it's important for everybody to watch it, because I feel like this happened in the 90s and not much has changed for women, and it was a lot sadder than I thought it was, and now I feel bad for all the times I joked about it. But definitely on Amazon Prime, Lorena. It's 4 episodes of the entire story and the backstory and the trials for both of them, and I definitely recommend it.
And the executive producer is Jordan Peele. You could see he's had his hand in it. The direction is really beautiful. The cinematography is great in it. Dramatize a lot of things that you wouldn't really notice. So right. I appreciate it.
And it's not one-sided. They do talk to both of them. So I know sometimes people think things are one-sided. They talk to him, they talk to her. And I highly recommend it. And I didn't know anything about this other than the basics. And I'm really glad I watched it, because I really feel like this is a very big issue still. And a lot still needs to be done. Absolutely. A lot of work needs to be done.
Absolutely. Obviously, we're 2 women on a podcast, so we have our very strong opinions about domestic violence and any kind of violence, period. I guess we're feminists. I don't really know. I consider myself more an equalist. I think everyone should be treated with respect and kindness. If you're green, you're purple, you're a woman, you're a man, it doesn't matter. As long as you contribute to society and you are not a dickhead, that's essentially what I care about as a human being.
People, it doesn't really matter what it is, but when you're watching this, tend to sympathize with the perpetrator, and the victim it's like the victim's getting interrogated and everything's on her. And the sad thing, and they even said it in there, is that not a lot has changed. And this is in 91. We're in 2019 and not a lot of things have changed. So definitely need to take some steps into changing things. And it's incredibly important for people to watch it. And it's just an overall interesting story. A lot of jokes came of it, but it's important.
And it's interesting as well, too, just for my last final comment about it. I honestly think if this happened today, John would have gone to jail. Like, there was no doubt in my mind. You know what I mean? But it's because at the time, people were not considering women's rights at all. This is Me Too movement. The Time's Up movement has changed so much.
And there's also
not just women's perspectives, but
there's
men as well.
There's a sexist element, but there's also kind of a racist element, because he did use her immigration status as a way to keep her in that marriage. And I think that that's very, very important, especially in the times that we live in now. Just the psychological damage, the manipulation, what he did to keep her in that abusive marriage. And it's just...
And it's hard for us to hear that, because we come from immigrant mothers. I hate the idea of the fact... I mean, my mother was a citizen on her own. She didn't have to marry into it. She became a citizen. But just the fact that my mother loves this country so much as Lorena does. You can see she loves it.
Oh, she loves it.
And it would make me sad to think that someone can use that as a threat to keep her to do something.
To keep her in a horrible situation. So
absolutely.
Amazon Prime will definitely be putting it on our website under our recommendation section. I definitely recommend men and women watch it together with your partner. It's really important. I actually have a pretty creepy email from one of our friends. Our friends are apparently creepier than we thought. Yeah. We did not know when we started this podcast that so many things happen to our friends. So this is from our friend Jessica. My mom believed that bringing flowers to graves in a cemetery and saying a prayer for the person buried would bring you good fortune and answer your prayers. I'm also Colombian, Jess, and I don't really know about this tradition, but we're going to go for it.
I mean, maybe it's a regional thing.
Maybe. All right. When I was around 14 or 15 years old, me and my friend went with my mother to the cemetery. We each had flowers and walked through rows of the cemetery looking for a grave that stood out to us. I would love to know how that choosing process
Good start.
She's like, I chose the headstone of a woman named Agnes. Later that night, we were at another friend's house getting ready to go out. After I showered, my friend's sister found her makeup bag had fallen out of the bathroom cabinet and spilled bottled foundation and her other makeup all over the bathroom sink on the floor. But what makes it the eeriest is that the foundation top was unscrewed, mascara was completely open, and the lipstick tops were off. And the cabinet was not far from the sink, so falling from that high could not have caused the caps to just pop off. I immediately knew it was Agnes. I told my friends I think she followed us home. They laughed, and her sister was pissed, but I was just scared. And that's
really scary, dude. Like, the fact that someone might have... I didn't know hauntings can happen via following you home. You always assume that people or energies can't travel, but I guess that's completely not true.
And also apparently you were like doing something nice and putting down flowers and saying a prayer, and she followed you home, and then
I wish I knew more. Like, was it the one day and then she disappeared? I don't know.
We're gonna have to ask for a follow-up to that story because I'm very curious. Like, how did you get rid of Agnes? Did you leave her at your friend's house? Like, because that's kind of fucked up. You brought her to your friend's house and then you went home.
Or some kind of Colombian brujeria and her mother got rid of it. You know, it's possible.
We're gonna ask Jessica. We're definitely gonna come up with a follow-up to that story.
That's interesting. But yeah, we'll bring it up at another point.
This week, Kristi has graciously looked up a story that I know I've never heard of, so I'm super excited.
This is actually an American story. I promise we're going to move to another country. We're just finding so much here. We want to kind of get to the really good stuff first. This happened in Hawaii, and this is a boat disappearance. This is the mystery of the Sarah Joe. When I say this location, what comes to mind? The sea. What do you think when you hear the words the sea? What do you think of?
Honestly, the ocean, even though I know I can swim, kind of freaks me out because there's just a lot of things we don't know about. It gets deep, and then there's creepy stuff that we don't know about, and I'm always afraid something's gonna grab my foot and pull me into the ocean, and you're never gonna find me.
For me, at first, superficially, as a lover of water, I see like a boundless body that I can kind of hone my skills. But upon like further introspective thought, it could be a truly frightening place, like you just said.
It can be beautiful and relaxing, but then it can also be super frightening.
Especially when you know certain facts about the sea. Like, did you guys know that the ocean is teeming with eddies like the black holes in space, meaning nothing in their path can escape? I didn't know there were black holes in the sea. The black holes in the ocean are so massive, they can measure up to 93 miles in diameter. To give you an idea of how large that is, that's bigger than the entirety of the greater Los Angeles area.
I'm not going to the beach ever again. I already didn't go, but I'm really not going.
Scientists, or the fact that scientists at the National Ocean Service have stated that science in general has only managed to explore solely 5% of the ocean.
That's not creepy at all.
Which means we have no real idea what creatures and predators were swimming underneath.
And it's crazy because we know more about space than we do the ocean, and the ocean is right there.
And considering the course of time over humanity, how many people, places, and objects have practically vanished into the deep waters?
A lot.
For as tempting and as beautiful as she is, the ocean can be heaven or hell on earth. And that's just like kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
The case of the mystery behind a Boston whaler ship called Sarah Joe brings up many questions and very deep fears as to what happened exactly to the 5 friends who had boarded it. Were they lost to the dark sea, or did something even more sinister happen? This is the case of the Sarah Joe. I'm going to kind of paint a picture for you. February 11th, 1979. It's the end of the 70s. A peanut farmer was president, Jimmy Carter. Rod Stewart's Do You Think I'm Sexy was #1 across America. For me, the 70s, I think I'm nostalgic of it. I feel like I always joke around that I was a teenager in the 70s. I have a sense of it because it's, when you look back, everything's cool. I love the style. I love the music, like Led Zeppelin. I love everything about it. I love the Volkswagens. I love all of that. But at the same time, if you think about the 70s, so much freaky stuff happened. You had serial killers. You had women being stolen. There's so many crazy stories. A lot of the stories we've covered have been in the late 70s into the early 80s. It was as fun as it was. It was still a crazy time. So it gives you an idea of what was going on in the United States. So we're going to turn over to the 5 men that were aboard the Sarah Joe on February 11th, 1979. Scott Mormon was 27, had come to Hawaii as part of his lifelong dream to live there, which he had finally been able to do after divorcing his wife in 75. which had encouraged him to finally do what he'd always wanted and start his life over in the picturesque town of Nahiku. So that is off the coast of Maui. The other 4 men were construction tile setter Benjamin Kalamai, 38, a plumber by the name of Peter Hanchett, 31, Patrick Wosner, which he was a carpenter, also 26, and Ralph Malakini, 27, who was in the trucking business. They called their crew, like jokingly, the Nahiku Gorillas. So they were close enough where they kind of have like a nickname for their crew of people. It was a cloudless, stunning day off Maui in a little place called Hana Bay. The day started off so beautiful that all the guys agreed it was too nice of a day to not go out. So they kind of played hooky and decided not to go to work. The weather was so good and the sea was so inviting, and they were all experienced and devoted, they joked that they should, and they did it. They went to Ralph Maliakini. They drive over to the home of his twin brother's place and borrow his boat and go out and fish. The Sarah Joe was her name, 17-foot Boston whaler, which I think needed like new spark plugs for the horsepower engine. And then after that, it was completely ready to go. That was like pretty much what they needed. The group loaded up on beer, snacks, water, and like a huge ice-filled cooler for any fish they might possibly catch. The Nahiku Gorillas, as they love to call themselves, were last seen at 10 a.m. heading off to enjoy their day of hooky. Within 2 hours of the departure, close to noon, the local weather worsened. Unfortunately, no one had bothered to check the forecast. Though, to be fair, this was typical behavior at this time. Like, Hana had no TV stations, and most of the radio forecasts were focused on other more populated side of the island.
Really not their fault.
So a lot of fishermen normally just kind of went out without checking. They kind of just did like a visual because they're pretty confident in their ability to judge the weather by their eye alone. So like that was pretty common at the time.
If you wake up and it's beautiful, I can see why.
Like now we can bust out our iPhones and be like, oh, there's a storm in 3 hours. You know, this was 1979. This wasn't an option.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. We can't really blame them for that.
But in this case, this would be a fatal mistake. The winter of 1979 was especially harsh across the United States, not just for the snow, but for the bitterly cold rains that we got that year. I actually Googled the weather just because I was super curious. I'm a weirdo and I love to track weather from the past. Fact about me. Anyway.
You're so weird.
I'm weird.
I love it.
I am weird. On that day, a low-pressure system was sneaking into the region, and by noon, the wind had abruptly changed directions and picked up gale-force winds, shaking froth off the air into the sea, heavy downpours of torrential rain. The storm became so violent and caused so much flooding and the damage in the town of Hana that it was soon recognized as the worst storm of the region in 50 years.
That's a crazy change of.
So it went from a beautiful day, 10 a.m. It looks great,
and that's super early too. Like they didn't even have any time out in the sea or
to
anything.
noon, where it basically became like a freaking tsunami. So that's how quick it happened. Ralph's brother, Ralph's twin brother and his wife became concerned as hell because they witnessed 40-foot tall swells hitting the shores.
Jesus fucking Christ. Okay.
Knowing the men were out there in the standard fishing boat with no ER equipment for this level of storm, they informed the Coast Guards.
Those boats aren't big at all. There's no way they could withstand
17 foot. If you Google it, we'll have pictures on our website, theearieamericas.com. The boat was a standard fishing boat. We're talking blue. 6-7 people max can fit in it. A little bit of fishing rods, equipment. That's it. They're really basic boat. While the storm was hitting the island, Peter's father, Peter Hanchett, John Hanchett, and his father, also named John Naughton, who is a marine biologist, went out in vain to search, but they had to retreat because it was unlike anything either of them had experienced.
40-foot. You're not finding anything, and you're risking your life.
This is a native Hawaiian fisherman and a marine biologist that had to pull back to find these boys.
If they're not finding them, nobody's finding them.
Right. All friends and families could do at this point was to wait and hope the guys could hold themselves down until the storm passed. By the next morning, February 12th, 1979, the men had made no appearance. Everyone suspected the worst. The boat had returned. The U.S. Coast Guards joined the local search efforts. Dude, this is crazy. The statistics on this is crazy. They did 330 hours of flying between 44 planes. Between local searches and the Coast Guards, they covered 73,000 square miles of territory for 5 whole days. I had to look that up. That's almost the size of South Dakota. That's how much these people looked for these guys.
You can't say there wasn't an effort.
The Coast Guards, after 5 days, of course, called off the search.
That's also exhausting, but it's also super expensive.
And it's not surprising given the manpower, time, distance. They covered in vain, And the Alanuihaha channel, I know I got that right, yes, is a place where the waters were the roughest around the island, and it had been battered by this crazy storm. So not only were they looking for these guys, but they had all this damage. There's a lot
Right, they're
to
also
do.
recovering from a storm. It's not
Right.
like they have, that's understandable.
Someone had reported that they heard a distress call from engine trouble over the Citizens Band radio, but Peter's dad, John, knew they didn't even go out with the radio. So it was truly like they were never seen again.
Oh my God.
Volunteers refused to give up, however, and they raised over $50,000, looking high and low at beaches, but found nada.
That has to be a lot of money in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Eventually, all effort stops, but the people seem haunted and never stop thinking or subconsciously looking for the Sarah Joe. Everyone wondered what happened to Scott, Peter, Patrick, Ralph, and Benjamin.
So the boat never came back either, right? They never found anything.
On September 8th, 1988, somehow the original search party members that went out to find the guys that same day they went missing, including family friend John Naughton, were on a routine wildlife mission in the uninhabited islands of the Western Pacific for the National Marine Fisheries Services. The Marshall Islands and a remote atoll. For those who don't know what an atoll is, it's a ring-shaped island comprised mainly of coral. Okay. So if you've ever been to any little islands and you see those islands where there's nothing,
right,
that's essentially what that was. The Marshall Islands are about 2,200 miles southwest of Hawaii.
So it's pretty
keep
far,
that in mind.
Yeah.
While working at the Taongi Atoll, Naughton came across an abandoned fiberglass skiff on the coastline with only a part of the registration on the boat that was legible. He saw that the registration began with HA, which indicates the state of Hawaii. And this next part is what kind of creates the storm of questions. As far as everyone was concerned, they were gone. It is what it is.
And it's been 10 years.
It's been 10 years.
Yeah.
This next thing opens up a whole new can of whoop-ass worms. Naughton and his team took a moment to decide what to do next, and being the smart human beings they were, took a look around to the surrounding area, and right away, they made another discovery about 100 yards from the boat. A makeshift cross made from driftwood was sticking on top of what appeared to be a shallow grave. From there, they saw a human jawbone protruding out of the marker made of coral and shingle stones. They found no other remains on the entire deserted island.
Someone had to put that there.
Yep. Later, John Naughton received confirmation that they did in fact find the Sarah Joe on this tiny island over 2,000 miles away. How does a boat disappear for 10 years and do 2,000 miles and not a single person saw it?
It's just, those waves were so big. How did it not just destroy the boat? Like, how did it wind up somewhere else?
Right. But this gets even stranger. Upon examining the grave, there was something particularly strange buried with Scott. There were sheets of unbound paper from a book with no writing in them. So like when you tear out out of a notebook or, multiple sheets, which seemed to have been slightly burned and scattered with slips of what appeared to be tinfoil of gold and silver.
So they're making a fire? Oh, from where do they get this stuff?
The team decided not to dig any further, fearing they would disturb a ritual burial or defile a grave. So they kind of stopped from there.
Which is a really good thing because most people wouldn't. They'd probably just keep digging.
And the teeth from the jawbone, which some suspected was left out intentionally for ID purposes, along with other bones in the grave, confirmed that the buried man was in fact Scott Mormon. There were no other grave sites, missing men, not even the engine was left on the island, deepening the mystery on top of what the hell is going on in this already mysterious case. Who buried Scott Mormon? Where are the other 4 men? Based on ocean currents, the Sarah Joe should have reached the Marshall Island about 3 months after the storm that dragged them out to sea in February of 1979. So just based on that trajectory, it shouldn't have taken 10 years to hit that island. Sometime in 1985, 6 years after the Sarah Joe went missing, that same atoll was surveyed and nothing was reported. The boat should have already been there.
Right, for years at that point.
So theories about the Sarah Joe have obviously come up. I'm going to kind of break them down based on the natural questions that come up. Who buried Scott? Was Scott buried by his crewmates? There was no sign of any other crew member. And though I find it odd that the engine was missing off the whaler, it doesn't necessarily imply that the other 4 attempted to escape or anything, because the boat is physically there. It could have simply fallen into the water after drifting into the sea for over a decade. Again, we don't know.
We don't know.
One of the more popular theories seemed to be that a Chinese fishing ship had found the boat drifting at sea along with the body of Scott, who just may have latched himself to the vessel to keep from being thrown off of the physical boat.
That makes sense.
the fishermen may have guided the boat into the lagoon and buried the one body they found out of respect.
Maybe.
The theory is that there's some kind of thing with the cryptic papers, which I'll get into.
Right, like that's everything's creepy, but there's something very weird about those papers.
So I'll bring up again the papers. So some also believe that Scott may have been the only survivor and was stuck on the island alone, or that he tied himself to the boat to not drift off to sea, just kind of died there. Then maybe
someone made the cross. You can't do that and put it on top of your own grave.
And forensics couldn't say whether Scott was dead upon arriving onto the shore, or if he somehow was still alive and eventually passed.
Right.
His family believes he was alive, but there's no conclusive way to obviously know, but they're pretty adamant that he was alive. Where was the boat the whole time? That's another question.
That's a great one.
The question becomes, where was the boat during the first 4 years before John Naughton's crew got there? Because there was another governmental survey. Some speculate that there may have been another crew, that the other crew may have seen it and assumed it was washed up after a storm, or they may have simply overlooked it. I thought, okay, maybe there was like sand shifts of debris, because
because they did have to make the decision to look around to even find that, so maybe they just missed it. Although I find that weird.
And my thing is, how do you miss a boat and a gravesite?
Right, it's one thing to miss the gravesite, but how do you miss the whole boat?
I looked it up to see how long this atoll is, and it's said to be 129 kilometers, or for Americans, 50 square miles. So how could a group sent by the government miss a 17-foot empty boat on such a small space?
Yeah,
it just doesn't make sense. Baffling, it really is. I looked high and low for an answer. No one has an answer. The next big one, and the big question, what happened to the other men? Everyone wants to know. Dissatisfied with simple speculation and no real answers, the family of the men hired a Honolulu private detective named Steve Goodnow. He used the weather trajectory to calculate the storm. He found out that the skiff was, quote, tantalizingly close to Kauai Island. It was so close that he theorized maybe the men attempted to swim to it and perhaps drowned.
That actually sounds kind of feasible.
Yeah. The atoll was also searched, but they found the outboard engine, but no other remnants were discovered. Goodnow now theorized that Scott, basically the last of his friends to make it, he has a suspicion that he died from either lack of food or water while the others were buried at sea, or he was dead and the rest of them drowned. That's kind of the two speculations. All of this is theory and doesn't factor in the lost time at sea, but you have to consider maybe Scott and the other survivors may have been directing the boat to find some help. That's kind of like my thought.
I would assume if they didn't have a radio and the storm got bad that they were looking for help.
Right, but this PI Goodnow came up with another breakthrough. So a Taiwanese fisherman claimed he buried him, but he didn't notify anyone because he was on the island illegally fishing. So he could have gotten in trouble. So this may explain the foil papers, which are called Joss papers, Joss. I had to web search this, and I found this on Wikipedia. It is an Asian custom believed that burning the paper is supposed to aid the spirit in which it passes as a representation of money or ghost money. And when you do a search of Joss paper, it sounds a lot like the paper that was found with Scott Mormon because they also burn the paper as well. So it sounds like a credible source. Okay. But again, all speculation. There are no solid theories on what happened to Ralph, Ben, Peter, Patrick, but most surmise that they didn't survive the first night of the storm or were cast away. A year after Scott's remains were found, one of my favorite shows of all time, Unsolved Mysteries, aired an episode about the case back in the 90s. So it's on the original ones. You can actually watch original Unsolved Mysteries on Prime as well right now. That's available. There are 2 memorials for the lost men at sea. One at the ramp at Hannah Bay where the men were last seen officially, and the atoll where the boat was discovered a decade after their disappearances. This will remain yet another mystery that the sea will forever hold.
This story is a little bit crazy.
Yeah, and I had never heard of it up until I found the research. So people haven't forgot them. When I was web searching, I noticed that it had come up the 40th anniversary, now the 50th, soon the 50th, and they still celebrate those men every day. It's still a mystery on Hannah Bay. People still talk about them. They still worry about them. Maybe one day we'll know, or maybe since we only know 5% of what goes on in that ocean, it's going to be one of the last things that we ever know in the world. So
I feel like that's the biggest mystery. It's like if we knew more about the damn ocean, then maybe we know more would happen. There's no way to know how the hell they got that far.
Yep. That is the case of the Sarah Joe. Crazy story.
Thanks for thoroughly creeping me out.
If for anyone afraid of the sea, I hope I scared you even further. So that's it.
I know how to swim and I don't even like going to the beach. I'm definitely not going anywhere. I'm not getting on a boat. I'm not going fishing. I'm not putting a toe in the water. I won't even go in a pool.
The only time I got kind of I get creeped out is when I'm at the ocean, is when I'm really far out by myself. That's when I get scared because I feel like the last person on the planet. No, because I'll keep swimming. Like, I love to swim, so I'll just keep going, and then I look up and I'm like, wow, the closest person to me is like 500 yards away. I feel like if there was Jaws beneath me right now, I'd be the first victim. Like, that's literally how I think because I watched Jaws way too young.
I love Jaws. But I this is why I don't go in the ocean. And I remember I was a competitive swimmer, and I remember speaking to, I forgot if it was a coach or another kid I swam with, but we were talking about swimming. And I was like, oh my God, I love swimming in the ocean. I'm going to go so far out. And then one of them turned around and they're like, do you know that most people who drown are people who know how to swim because they don't know when to stop and they keep going thinking that they can handle it and then they end up drowning. And I literally don't go out that far anymore.
Wow.
I was like 11. It scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, that's a pretty traumatizing
Because think about it. If you don't know how to swim, you're not going anywhere because you know you can't swim. But when you know you can swim, you're like, well, I can keep going. And it makes sense. And then I stopped going out that far. And, you know, I'm pretty sure that's when my anxiety with everything started. But the ocean, it's mysterious and it's crazy.
That's one of the jillion cases that you could talk about the sea. I mean, we could literally do a podcast about missing sea stuff.
Let's start another one.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah, there's a ton. So if anyone's fascinated with the sea,
have any interesting stories, you can email us at
Absolutely.
EerieAmericas@gmail.com.
Totally. And now we're going to move on to one of our favorite segments, Who Does That?
Which I need it because I'm creeped out, so.
Who does that? Who does that? Who does that? Who does that?
Unfortunately, I have another Florida one. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, guys. I think we're going to have to change this to Florida. Why do you do this?
Like,
I think that's what we're going to have to change that segment. Florida, why do you do this? You're going to make me have to re-record my friend saying that because everything's from Florida. I was so happy that I found one that wasn't from Florida, that I did it last week because I was just like, it's not from Florida.
I promise that we try. Like, we'll text each other like, I have a really funny one, but it's from Florida, and we have to do them because they're just so good.
The more and more I research, the more and more that theory is out that not weird things happen in Florida. It's just everyone reports it. No, and it really does happen.
So super recent. This was February 25th.
Ooh, okay.
And the headline reads, and this is from NBCMiami.com. Florida man charged with battery after allegedly throwing cookie at girlfriend. Apparently, I'm just going to do all the stories where people throw food at each other.
You can get arrested for throwing a cookie at somebody. I should have been arrested a million times.
I'm pretty sure I threw something today.
Yeah, I throw things constantly.
I think it depends on whether or not it hurts them. So, I guess it was a bad cookie. What kind of freaking cookie?
Mm-hmm.
So it says a Florida man is facing a domestic battery charge after his girlfriend accused him of throwing a cookie at her. Wade Smith, 41, was arrested Sunday in the alleged incident at his home in Zephyrillis. That just sounds horrible. The victims told deputies that Smith threw a hard piece of cookie at her, hitting her in the forehead. Deputies said the woman was left with a red mark from the cookie. The defendant admitted to throwing the cookie at the victim without her consent. So I think that's, she didn't consent to having this hard-ass cookie thrown at her forehead. Sure. That's what the arrest report said. So he was booked in the jail and he's remained in custody on Monday. No
was
attorney.
She injured?
She had a red mark on her forehead.
Seriously? The guy gets arrested for throwing a cookie and a red mark?
I should be locked up. I have thrown way harder things at people.
Seriously, I should be in Attica right now if that's the case. That's ridiculous. I think I threw something at a coworker harder than that, this week.
My coworker, we wear headphones at work sometimes, and she would throw paper clips and stuff at me to get my attention.
And that leaves more of a mark than a damn cookie.
Hit me in the head, so it's she should be in jail right now.
And those hurt a lot more than a cookie. Period, point blank.
You Florida people like to arrest people for very quickly, I guess, because
seriously, I mean, you guys do the death penalty, so I think it's just an excuse to try.
I got the frozen pork chop one because that can kind of hurt, but it's a cookie.
Yeah. Oh, Florida. Bless your little hearts.
I mean, what am I supposed to do when I get stories like that? Not read it?
And you guys, we're going to put this link up. You have to see this guy. The picture of this man is horrifying. He has a face tattoo.
Oh, he has several, but there's a spider web coming out of one end.
And it looks like it's a part of his hair. He's just a hot mess. There's no other way to describe him. Just the hottest mess.
He looks like he would throw a cookie at someone.
He looks like he would throw a dagger in my face. I think she should be happy that it was just a freaking cookie.
Right? It's
based on that guy.
He really wanted.
He looks like he got those in prison. So if he just threw a cookie, I think that she dodged a huge bullet. Pun intended. So I can't even laugh at that.
But thank you guys so much for listening. Out of all the podcasts and podcasting, you're listening to ours, so we appreciate it.
Gracias. Yeah, definitely.
Check us out every Wednesday. Follow our Instagram, email us, whatever. Leave us a review if you like what you hear.
We would love to hear from you guys. Shoot us an email if you have a crazy story, suggestion, whatever you feel like. We're always down to chat. So thank you so much for checking us out. Like Vicky said, you guys hear from us really soon.
In a week.
In a week.
Bye.